say, look, there is my iCard, which Beck has issued, and look at this iCard. My chairman board of governor is certifying that all these details are correct. So they may say, well, who is the chairman board of governors? I don't understand. I don't know whether it is individual signatures or not. Right? Then what do I do? If they say like that, then I will need to have a copy of the iCard of chairman board of governors. Right? And hopefully that iCard has been signed by a governor of the state. So I will show them this and say, look, indeed the signatures are of this gentleman and his iCard is this, and his details have been verified by the governor of the state. And you better know governor of the state, right? You should have a copy of the signature of the governor of the state. So this trust need not be in an individual. This trust could be hierarchical. It could, I am Dheeraj Sanghi because my board of governor chairman proves that. He is board of governor chairman because the governor proves that. And this could be multi-level hierarchy. This hierarchy could have multiple people, right? Therefore, same way with public key. So I have a public key which somebody, some company in Chandigarh is saying, we have verified all these details, and this is indeed his public key. And somebody else can say, hey, I don't trust this Chandigarh thing. Who is these guys, right? Then this, so remember, if Chandigarh company has signed my public key, it means that they have encrypted it using their private key. They also have a public key. Right? So now I need the proof that it is indeed their public key. So they will need to go to a bigger company and get their key signed by them and say, look, we are this company and this bigger company is trusting us that we do a good job, etc., and attach that certificate as well. Right? So the idea is that whenever I will send my public key to somebody, I will also send a proof that that public key belongs to me. And that proof is called digital certificate. So I have a certificate from somebody who has issued me this public key, saying that we issued it, this is correct, this is the expiry date, this is the information, blah, 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 and it is signed, that is encrypted using our private key, and this is our public key. So in fact, around the world, we have a public key infrastructure where there are a few people who are worldwide trusted. They will issue public key, private key pair to several other registrars, as they are called. And these registrars will then check, issue a public key, private key to me, and they will verify that indeed this public key is mine. Right? And whenever I am going to a website or I'm going to myself, I will attach my public key, my digital certificate issued by this intermediary, and his digital certificate issued by this worldwide guy. Right? So all this is a part of public key infrastructure. Now we said in an earlier slide that exchange of keys using public key is very, very simple. And that's what we are showing here. So the way, so we said that public key is expensive. We want to use shared key for most of the data, and exchanging that shared key, if you already have public key, private key, is very simple. So the sender will generate a key, which is the session key. It is going to encrypt this key using the receiver's public key. Okay. So remember now that if I am encrypting this using receiver's public key, the only way somebody can figure this out is through receiver's private key. Okay. And I just transmit the key because nobody other than the receiver knows receiver's private key. Nobody else can find out this key. Okay. Therefore, this key can only be known to the receiver. So I generated a key and I send it to the receiver. So I just take a session key and encrypt it using public key of the receiver and send it. That's it. There is nothing else that needs to be done, and we have exchanged a key. From now onwards, we can start using this K, the shared key, KS, for all of the messages. However, there are many, many instances where the two sites don't have a public key. In fact, most of us don't have a public key. Right? Under these situations, what do we do? How do we, do secret communication or confidential communication between two of us? This is where the Diffie-Hellman key exchange comes in. So the idea is, can we agree on a shared key without public keys? So if both sides don't have public keys, can we agree on a shared key? Right? Now, how do we agree on shared key? We are going to assume that everything we are speaking, everything we are transmitting, somebody can see on the way. So I can't just shout that this is the key to be used, because people on the way is going to hear that out and they will know what the key is, right? So can we send information through insecure channel in a way that the two sides can agree on a shared key, but anyone else reading those messages cannot know the key? That's really the problem statement. Okay, so everything is being sent through insecure channel. But despite that, despite the fact that everybody can read all this, I still want to be able to agree on a key which only a two endpoints know. That's, appears to be extremely difficult problem. But indeed, this problem was solved very early on in the 70s by two researchers in security, Dippy and Hellman. In fact, these two gentlemen, I think last year was it, or the year before that, got an ACM Turing Award for their work. I think this came out in about 1975, if I remember correctly. So what's the maths behind it? What's the conceptually they are trying to do? So we are assuming there are two entities, A and B, who want to compete. So both of them are going to generate a secret. A will generate a secret X, and B is going to generate secret Y. Secret X stays with A, secret Y stays with B. They don't communicate X and Y to each other. But what do they do communicate is, A is going to use some function F, right? We will see on the next slide what kind of function could that be. So A is going to send value fx to B. So this function f is also well known. There is no problem with that function. I mean, any third party listening on the wire can know this function f. And B is going to send the value of fy to A. So again, remember, A knows x, B knows y. A sends fx to B, and B sends fy to A. Okay. So the function f is a one-way function, or many-to-one function. Therefore, knowing fx, you cannot find out x, and knowing fy, you cannot find out y. So now, after these two communications have done, the A has sent fx to B and B has sent fy to A. A knows x and fy. Right? A always knew x is the secret that it has generated, and it has received fy from B. And B knows y and fx. Okay. Now I will say, is there a function h such that h of x and fy, these are the two entities that A knows, is same as h of y and fx, which are the two quantities B knows, right? So if I can find a function h which has this property, then clearly, the value of that function is the shared key. Both of them are completely the same value, right? But is there a function like that? So, and thankfully, there is a function like that. Not a very complicated function, it turns out. All right, so we will have in this protocol some public information which the nodes on the way, any intruder can easily read and store. But there is some secrets, right? So there are two large prime numbers which are involved in maths, N and G, and one of them is smaller than the other. Both are typically generated by whoever starts the protocol and sent to the other. Anyone can see these numbers. Right? So in our example, we'll assume A starts the protocol. A, gets in touch with B saying, I'm going to talk to you. And therefore, A is going to generate N and G, but B could have generated them as well. The only thing is they are public information. Both A and B are going to use the same NMG. And anybody on the way can also know what these values of NMG are. They are not secrets. They are just, they're public information. The secret information, as we said in the last slide, are really X and Y. The random number created by A and the random number created by B. And again, emphasizing that X is only known to A will never tell X to B. Similarly, B will never tell Y to somebody, but Y is only known to B. So with all this, how will a key be generated? Again, we said that we are assuming in this example, A is starting the communication. A really asking B that communicate. Are you okay with that? And when it does that, it's going to generate G, N, and X. Remember, X is the secret, G and N are public. And it computes a random number R1, which is G raised to the power X mod N. Okay. So remember, G and N are two primes, and so G raised per X mod N is the number that it computes. So now it's very clear that if you know R1, you cannot find X, because there are infinite values of X which are possible. So which of those X A is using, there is no way you can figure that out. A is going to send G, N, and R1 to B. Again, on the way, people can find G, people can N, people can read R1, but knowing all these three quantities, they cannot guess X. That's the important thing, that they don't know the secret, the X. And B now knows G, N, and R1. Now B is going to generate Y. Okay, there is a question in between: what should be the range of random numbers, small or large? These numbers should be very, very large, because if these numbers are small, then you can more easily. So the way to break this would be you start guessing X, and you assume that the computer would have probably guessed an 8-digit number or 10-digit number, whatever, right? So you should make sure that guessing X is itself difficult, right? And therefore G and N should be very large numbers. So B is going to generate Y, and it knows G and N because it received them from A. So it can very similarly, compute R2, which is G raised for Y mod N. So this mod function is what the function F was in our previous slide. Okay. So remember, both the sides are using the same F function. The only parameter different is X and Y. Otherwise, the function is same. So A has generated Fx, B has generated Fy, and A has sent Fx to B, and B is similarly going to send F to A. So R2 is being sent to A. Again, knowing R2, anybody on the way cannot guess. So now we have reached that point on the previous slide when we were talking about that A has X and Fy, B has Y and Fx. Okay. And is there a function H which will operate on these two parameters on both sides and come up with the same value? And it turns out that the mod function is such a thing, right? So the same function that we use to generate the F and H are really the same function. So A is going to compute K, which is R2 raised to X mod N. Okay, so R2 is the Fy, but that's what I received from B. So I'm going to raise to the power X mod N. This is going to give me key. This is going to give me a value K. And B also computes something similar. It has Y and Fx. So it takes Fx, which is R1. R1 raised to y mod n, and it is going to compute the same number. Okay, and we'll see why it computes the same number. You just do the math, we'll do that in the next slide. This is the same. So now A and B now have shared key K. Notice the only public information was G and N, and fx and fy, right? R1 or R2. Right? And knowing these four pieces of information, G, N, R1 and R2, right? Nobody can find out K. No secret information transmitted. Nobody else can compute without knowing why. Now let's look at the computations. So A's computation was R2 raised to x mod n, and R2 was G raised to the power y mod n. Okay. So when we do G raised to y mod n raised to x, it essentially means you are doing G raised to yx mod n. Mod n is same as mod n. Okay. So A has computed G raised to yx mod n. Similarly, if you look at the B's computation, it is R1 raised to y mod n. R1 is nothing but G raised to x mod n raised to the power y. So it will be same as G raised to xy mod n. And G raised to xy is same as G raised to yx. Yx is same as xy, right? The multiplication is commutative. And therefore, G raised to yx mod n is same as G raised to xy mod n, which is the key that they are agreed on. So we have seen that very simple function, just a mod function, is allowing us to agree on a key without anybody on the way being able to figure out what that key is. Any questions so far? Now this looks great, but there is a problem that people found out very quickly once this paper was published. And that is man in the middle attack. A man in the middle attack is essentially saying that if an intermediate node can read and modify messages between A and B during the key exchange phase, so nobody can find out this key K. Okay, that's very clear, right? But can I do something on the way that I force you to generate a key that I know of? So I will edit those messages in some ways, and I will force you to generate a key that I know. So remember that if these messages correctly got transmitted from A to B and B to A, they will result in a key that nobody can know. That part is very clear. But now we are talking about an adversary who can change messages on the way, and instead send a message that will force the two sides to come up with a key of the choice of the adversary. And since this adversary is kind of sitting in the middle of the two, is looking at all the communication between A and B, therefore we're calling it man in the middle attack. And we don't call it woman in the middle attack because we assume all the nasty things are done by men. Okay, so this intermediate node can read all, once it has been able to force you to use certain keys, then of course it can read all future encrypted messages between them. The whole communication is no longer secret, and the confidentiality is being compromised. Okay. And will do that by masquerading itself as A to B and B to A. So to A, it is going to say I am B, therefore communicate with me, and to B, it will say I am A, therefore communicate with me. How exactly this is going to happen? So this intermediate node is going to generate its own random value Z. So remember, A is going to generate X, B is going to generate Y, and this intermediate guy is going to generate Z. So it's going to compute R3 or FZ, which is G raised to Z mod n from the public values of N and G. Remember, N and G are public, so A sends N, G, and Fx. Right? I stop that. I capture that. I don't let it go to B. Right? I'm going to generate a random value z. I'm going to, calculate fz. So when it receives R1 from A, I compute R3 and I send R3 to B. I don't send R1 to B. So I'm cheating here. I'm changing the message. So this is what we said, that if there is somebody in between who can change the message, then this attack will be successful. So B is going to generate random value Y, NNG it has received. It assumes it is receiving everything from A, but it is instead receiving this from a node. And therefore, it is going to generate f of Y, which is essentially R2 G raised by Y mod N. And it is sending it back to A, but this intermediate guy captures that again, and instead of sending R2 to A, it sends R3 to A. So now remember what has happened: R1 A to A2 intermediate, R3 intermediate to B, R2 B to intermediate, and R3 intermediate to A. So intermediate node is sending on both sides an R3 or FZ, right? While A and B are sending correct messages, right? But those messages are not reaching endpoints. So A is going to assume this message has come from B. Of course, this man in the middle is making sure that this is what A assumes, and is going to compute R3 raised per X mod N, whatever R3 it received, right? It's going to compute R3 raised per X mod N, and let's call this key KA. Similarly, B is going to compute its own key, assuming it has received R from A, but it has received R from intermediate node. We're going to compute R3 is per Y mod N, just like this is the standard computation of the element, and it's going to generate a key. And remember, this key is going to be different. The two sides have generated two different keys. Okay. But what is interesting is that the intermediate node computes both KA and KB. So intermediate node is going to look at R1, what it received from A, and says R1 raised per Z mod N. So essentially, what this intermediate node is doing, it is running a Diffie-Hellman protocol with A as well as B. Okay. It's telling A that I'm B. It is telling B that I'm A. It has complete Diffie-Hellman protocol with A. So they will, at the end of this protocol, share a key, which is KA, which I'm calling as KA. Similarly, it has run a complete Diffie-Hellman protocol with B saying I'm A, and they have exchanged some messages, at the end of which they share a key, which I'm calling as KB. Right? Guy shares a key KA with A and shares a key KB with B, and A assumes that I'm talking to B, B assumes I'm talking to A. So A is going to send a message encrypted with KA. Intermediate guy can read that message because it knows KA. It can decrypt this message again using KB and send it to B. B will read the message correctly, no issues. It will respond, assuming it's communicating with A. Right? So the intermediate guy will read all the messages. If there is any secret in those messages, you are doomed. Right? So A encrypts using K, intermediate node encrypts using KB, sends it to B, and similar stuff happens in the reverse direction. And these are the computations that the two sides do. So A's computation is R3 raised per X mod N. R3 was G raised per Z mod N. So A is computing G raised per ZX mod N. Right? This is the key between A and intermediate node. Similarly, B's computation is R3 raised per Y mod N, which is G raised per Z mod N raised per Y mod N, G raised per ZY mod N. Right? The intruder is going to compute R1, which is received from A raised per Z mod N. It's going to result in G raised per X Z mod N, which is same as G raised per ZX mod N. Right? So it shares a key with A. Similarly, it's going to use R2, what it receives from B, and say R2 raised per Z mod N, which is G raised per Y mod N raised per Z mod N, or G raised per Y Z mod N. This is same as G raised per ZY mod N. Right? So essentially, the intermediate guy has done complete Diffie-Hellman both with A and with B, shared keys with them, and keep giving them this message essentially to A it is saying I'm B, to B it is saying I'm A, and everything now onwards, whatever goes through, I'm going to be able to decrypt, encrypt again, send it on the other side without any of them knowing that I'm reading all the messages. Okay. So this is the man in the middle attack, pretty straightforward. So intruder has both keys, one shared with A and the other shared with B. So what is the solution to this? Diffie-Hellman is probably the most commonly used protocol in network security. So we need to have a solution. Otherwise, we wouldn't be using this. So one very simple solution, which some people use, is to send half packets. Now, so let's say we have generated all these keys. I have generated KA, have A, you are B, or generated KB. Now, what does encryption means? What does confidentiality means? Confidentiality means that if you receive a message, it has not been changed on the way, and it has not been seen on the way. Now, how can I ensure this in the light of the discussion we have had, where we are saying that we could have man in the middle attack. So suppose A sends half the packet. Now intruder has a problem. It cannot decrypt the packet, and it cannot re-encrypt as a result. It cannot send half packet of re-encrypted packet. So hence it cannot send newly encrypted packet. And A is not going to send the second half till it hears from B. So the man in the middle, even though it was able to generate keys and so on and so forth, it is not able to read the message, because it will get the second half only after B sends some kind of message. And B is going to send message only when it receives the message. So this is a pretty simple way of solving this man in the middle attack problem. If you see what happens in real life is that invariably, somebody will say, I have, a public key also. So that guy will send some information which will make sure that the key that they have agreed upon is really the key. But what I find strange in that is, if you had a public key, then was it necessary to go to Diffie-Hellman? So the reason they still go through Diffie-Hellman, even though one side has public key, is because they want to be able to authenticate in some sense both sides. Right? So what you will do is you use Diffie-Hellman for agreeing on a key, and then one side typically, for example, when I go to bank side, I don't have a public key private key pair, but the bank has public key private key pair. So I can agree on a key using Diffie-Hellman, and then the bank can send the same key using private key. Okay, and I know bank's public key, and therefore I can verify the key that we have agreed upon. So something of that kind. I'm not giving the whole protocol, and the simple one that I just said is actually erroneous, because anybody can make the key. But essentially, you have other ways of solving this problem. So the last part of today's talk is authentication using challenge response. So the idea of authentication using symmetric keys is essentially this. We are assuming that two nodes, they share a symmetric key, and if let's say me and you want to communicate and we share a symmetric key, then a simple way to authenticate would be to say, hey, do you know the key? Right? And you will say, yes, I know the key. And I say, okay, if you know the key, then you should be able to encrypt something that I send you, right? So I'll send you a number, you encrypt it, and when you send it back to me, I will know whether that encryption is correct or not, and therefore I will know indeed you are the one who got it. So basically, challenge response means that a node challenges the other to prove that it has a shared key, which will imply authentication. Now, one simple way of doing this challenge response is that A wants to, we are just assuming that A initiates the communication. So whoever initiates the communication, so in this case, A is going to tell B, hey, I want to talk to you, I'm A. B is going to send a message to A saying, hey, if you are A, prove to me that you are A. And if you want to prove to me that you are A, here is a random number encrypted using our shared key. And if you are able to encrypt, then I'll assume you are A. So it just sends a random number back to A. Then A receives that random number and indeed is able to encrypt that. So KAB is the shared key between A and B. So I'm using that for encrypting RB, the random number generated by B, and send it back to B. So B decrypts that, finds out, yes, indeed it is RB. Says, yeah, A is indeed authenticated. However, authentication should be two-way, right? So if I'm talking to you and saying, hey, I'm A, and I'm convincing you that I'm A, but I should also be convinced that I'm talking to the right person on the internet. Right? So then A is going to send a B saying, hey, I prove myself to be A. Now you prove yourself to be B. How do you prove? Again, the same thing. I'm going to send you a random number and you encrypt it, send it back to me. If the encryption is correct, then I'll assume you're B. So B is going to indeed, in this case, encrypt that random number using the shared key KAB. And when A receives it, say, yeah, I'm talking to B, no issues. And this is going to make sure that both sides are able to authenticate each other. Right? Now, in this protocol, we are seeing that there are some messages which could possibly be combined. Right? I mean, we really don't need 5 messages. Okay? So, for example, if you look at message number 1 and 4, they could be combined. There is apparently no reason why we can't combine. Okay? Similarly, message number 2 and 5. So if I'm going to send RA earlier on, then 5 also can go with 2. Okay, so let's look at what that means. So I can compress these messages to 3, where A sends a message to B in the beginning saying, hey, I'm A, I want to talk to you. But before I talk to you, I want you to prove that you are B. My message is not going to a wrong place. And to prove that you are B, please encrypt RA and send me back. So B then, of course, encrypts this RA and send it back. But it also says, hey, I don't know whether you are A or not. So here is my random number, RB, and please encrypt it and send me back. So both sides are generating a random number. Both sides are asking the other side to encrypt it using their shared key. And both sides are then sending those encrypted numbers. And both sides on receipt of such a thing are verifying. And therefore, each side is verifying or authenticating the other side. So, do we really need a 5-way handshake, or will 3 messages work? Now, it turns out that there is a problem with 3 messages. This is what may happen. There are 2 colors that I'm using because these are 2 separate connections that A has with B. So somebody is masquerading as A, and in this method, it is able to convince B that I'm A even when it is not. That's what we are showing here. So A here is not A; it is a masquerading. Somebody else is sending these messages. So just like the previous slide, A is going to this A prime, let's call it, sends a message to B saying, "Hey, I'm A. and I want to talk to you, and but I want to make sure that this message is reaching the right place. If you are B, please encrypt it using R shared key and send me back the encrypted number. So B says, all right, this is KBRA. It encrypts that number. And here is a random number. You should also encrypt this number and send it back to me, because I also want to know that you are A. You're claiming to be A, but I want to make sure that you are A. Now, of course, it is not A, therefore it cannot encrypt this RB1. Okay. But it plays a trick now. It creates another connection with B. And you say, hey, I'm A, I want to talk to you. And you know what? I want to make sure that my message is going to the right B. Please, therefore, encrypt it using the R shared key and send it back to me. And this time, the random number it uses, RB1, is exactly the same random number it received from B in the first connection. This is the second connection. And B, of course, naively send it back to KB RB1. Right? Of course, it also says, hey, I want to know you are A, and therefore please encrypt RB2, etc., etc. And now, the number he has got on the second connection, the KB1, it just uses that number on first connection, and A sends a message to B saying, hey, this is KBRB1. And B will say, yes, good. And now you are authenticated, right? And A can simply drop the second connection, not respond to it, or whatever. Okay? So clearly, we have been able to achieve authentication in a wrong way. Therefore, this three-way handshake does not work. Okay. And this kind of attack is called reflection attack. When I use information received by you to fool you, to make wrong authentication, I'm just resending it back to you, is known as reflection, the reflection of the data that I got from you, essentially. So this is known as reflection attack. So authentication, this particular authentication scheme, the three-way handshake scheme, is has a problem that reflection attack is successful. Now, clearly, we don't know this. What is it that we can do? Is there a solution to this? I mean, of course, we can go back to five-way attack, right? So the very, very simple solution would be, okay, why don't we go back to five-way attack, five-way handshake? The reason I'm not going back to five-way handshake is that even though it is better than three-way handshake, even the five-way handshake suffers from some version of reflection attack. So that while we presented that as a great scheme, it's actually not that great. It's better than the three-way handshake. It was very trivial here to figure this out, right? So what is it that we can do to avoid reflection attacks in general? Any suggestions, any ideas? What was really happening in this reflection attack that we are seeing on the screen? That we could do something. If you do this, let's just focus on this three-way handshake stuff, and let's say, what is it that we can do so that this three-way handshake, based reflection attack is not going to be possible? Come on, guys. Anybody think about it? You have time. There is no hurry. But there are really some very trivial things that should immediately come out. There are more complicated things that you can do, of course. Trivial things that you can do. The use of RB2 is missing in. Well, I'm just going to ignore the second connection. Right? I mean, I'm authenticated on connection 1, that's good enough for me. Okay, so the question is, now we have just seen that the three-way handshake way of challenge response, of authenticating each other. I can, I can attack that authentication protocol, and using two different connections, I've been able to authenticate myself when I'm not A to B. Okay. So if I want to avoid a wrong authentication, what is it that I can do? What modifications I can do in this, three-way handshake or five-way handshake or whatever, so that reflection attack is not possible. All right, so let me give you one trivial solution to this. I'm talking only in the context of what we are seeing in front of our screen. Okay. A must send RB1 as it is not encrypted. I'm not sure what. Yes, good afternoon. बताइए. Yes.
Instead of RB.
I didn't get you, sorry.
I'm Amuda, sir, actually. I'm statement between sending a file. Instead of RB1, we can use B2. What it has.
I'm sorry, your voice is getting cut. I'm not able to hear you. Maybe, yeah, sure. Go ahead. If your voice is not clear, then maybe you can type in the chat box. I'm following the chat box. Right. So one trivial solution is, we can say that we are not going to allow multiple connections between the two nodes, right? Because here what we're doing was that the information that connection 1 needs is coming on connection 2. So if we were to say, hey, only one connection allowed between two nodes, then that will take care of this particular problem. Okay. It is easier said than done, though. I mean, between large servers, so for example, if I'm going to a bank site from PEC, I'm going through a proxy, and really all these authentications are probably happening between my proxy and the bank site. Maybe while I am going to the bank site, there are 10 other people from the campus who are going to the bank site, and therefore 10 connections will happen. So I think a simple way that we just said that, if you just at the server side, if you just simply say who all with who all am I having a connection right now, and if I already have a connection with this guy, I'm not going to start a second connection. That would solve the problem, but that's probably not easy to do. You would have to allow multiple connections. What are the other things that we could do? Instead of RB1, we can go for RB2. Which message are we talking about? I mean, RB1 is the one which B sent me. So I'm using that in the third message, second connection, right? And if in the second message B had sent me a different random number, whichever that random number is, that's what I would have used in message 3. Okay, so maybe I'll give you the answer. There are many things that you can do. You can have different keys for 2 directions. This is strongly encouraged these days. So if you had KAB and KBA are 2 different keys. So what will happen in that case is that I have received KB R1. I cannot use KB RB1 in the 5th message. So I receive KB RB1 in the 4th message, and I use that information in the 5th message. Right? So if KB was different from KBA, right, the key in so both A and B share 2 keys. One will be used whenever A is sending a message. Of course, B knows both the keys, A knows both the keys. But they have agreed that one key is going to be used by A for encryption and B for decryption, and one will be used for B to encrypt and A to decrypt. Right? In the 2 directions, the 2 different keys. Then I cannot play this game because KAB RB1 is not something that I can use in the message 5. Right? I will need to use KBA or whatever the other key to encrypt RB1. Also, I can have different sets of random numbers for 2 directions. Right? See here I'm B is sending RB1 and A is also sending RB1. Suppose I were to say that let's say B is server and A is a client. That client to server will always be odd numbers and server to client will always be even numbers. Right? So I'm dividing the number space into 2 and saying only these numbers can be used from client to server and these numbers can be used from server. So let's say client to server was odd and the server to client was even. So B would have sent me an even number. I can't use that even number in the message 3 because I can only send an odd number in message 3. So if we divide the number space and say half the numbers can be used in one direction, half the numbers can be used in the other direction, then again, this reflection attack will not be possible. The other, an important safety precaution, and this is something I would encourage you to kind of follow in your real life as well. The node initiating the communication must authenticate first. That's like absolutely. I mean, this is a very, very important principle of security in life. It's not just we're talking about computer security. So, for example, when somebody calls me up and says, "Are you a customer of this credit card?" and I'm calling from this credit card company, right? I said, "Yes, I'm the customer." Then they will say, "To verify that you are Dheeraj Sanghi, please give us your date of birth or the last 4 digits of credit card or this and that." Right? And my first reaction is, hey, you started the communication. You need to first prove that you are calling from this credit card company. Right? I'm not going to give you anything because how do I know, you are not fake? Right? So if you simply have this principle that whoever starts communication must authenticate first, that would go a long way. So in most cases, the bank doesn't know how to authenticate itself. Right? So I would say, look, you got to tell me that you know information which is not very easily known to public. For example, can you tell me my 16-digit credit card number? Right? If you tell me my 16-digit credit card number, then maybe I will have some trust. Of course, my 16-digit credit card number is known probably to the restaurant that I go to or other places I go to. But still, I will have some trust level. Right? So I will always say the node initiating the communication must authenticate first. And of course, we have already talked about only allow one connection between the two. But I think this third one, I really want to emphasize that in your real life, please follow this and you will be safer. Okay. And lastly, even the 5-way handshake is not fully secure. That can have reflection attacks. In fact, even if you just look at this textbook like Tenenbaum, it will tell you how it is not fully secure and what attacks are possible. Okay. So that's all for today. I am I'm finishing a little bit early. Typically, this is the amount of stuff I am able to cover in 1.5 hours in a face-to-face class, because face-to-face class invariably has a lot more questions, I guess. Maybe I should have planned a little bit more for online class, but whatever. I think 6 minutes are there. So maybe you can ask me any questions about network security, about the topic that we just covered, or in general about network security.
Dear participants, any questions? Okay, so there's a question in the chat box.
Schedule a meeting in Microsoft Teams. Some of them have started meeting with my name without information. We know what might have happened. I mean, Microsoft Teams doesn't authenticate your name. Right? So anybody can use whatever name. That's not a security issue. It could be a security issue, but I'm saying that. So, for example, when I send whatever name I want, right, there is authentication. So that's not a breaking of authentication, and you are living with that. Is web.whatsapp.com as secure as WhatsApp application? I have no idea. I don't trust any of these companies. They can make all kinds of claims, but I have had no chance of going into those claims. Share PPTs, sure, I will send it to them, and you can, Amandeep, I can send this PPTs to you.
Yes, sir.
All right, if there are no further questions, then thank you very much. And I'll just, with security protocol algorithm used in bank transactions, differ from bank to bank. Well, the details of the protocol, I mean, there are, may differ from bank to bank. But conceptually, some of these things, I mean, we didn't actually go into any complicated protocol. I mean, these are just very, very basic stuff that we talked about. But any bank would have its own implementation of VPN. Any bank would have its own implementation of public private key and so on. So basic level, some of these things will stay, but their implementation will be from one bank to the other. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for such a wonderful elaborative session and for taking your precious time out for us. And we hope we can get some more lectures from you in the future. So,
Thank you.
thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.
Dear participants, we would now take a lunch break for an hour and meet again at 2:25. I request all of you to log in at 2:25 so that we can start our next session at sharp 2:30. Thank you so much for your participation. Those who have missed out on attendance, I shared the link during the session. I'm sending it again. Just wait. The link is there in the chat box now. So those who have not marked their attendance yet, they may do that. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Amandeep, for
Thank you,
taking
sir.
care of the whole things. Okay.
Okay, sir. Thank you.